Chapter 2. Aliana. Hold still a moment. We'll soon sort you out. The stranger turned in his saddle. He unslung a long, slender horn from a strap across his shoulder. He put it to his lips and blew a sweet, piercing note. The sound floated away and echoed through the trees. The stranger looked back down at the boy in the bushes. "That'll bring the others back. You'll see. We'll have you out in a slice." The boy hoped that "out in a slice" was a Sitigare phrase for really quickly, and that he wasn't going to find himself cut out of the thorns in slices by the cruel-looking blade hanging from the rider's side. He didn't fancy being cut up like one of his mother's cakes. Moments later there was another swirl of dust. He heard shouts and a whinnying sound. Horse spittle splashed his cheek as the thicket of bushes was surrounded by several of the other riders. Laughter stung at his ears as they realised the mess he was in. Voices came at him from all sides. "Well, well, Lord Mattian, what have you caught, eh? Is that Peggiar? Is it a silk fox? Have you caught a fish, Mattian? Even better than that, look at this." The boy felt their eyes upon him. "Poor chap. Is he stuck?" "Well, of course he's stuck. Stupid question." Ha ha ha! The pompous laughter continued. "Do you need a hand there, friend? Look at the state of him. He's covered in cuts. Well, it'll be the thorns, of course. Have you been there long, old chap? Hey, the scent of his blood will bring that Peggiar back. Maybe we should leave him here and wait for it. He'll be perfect bait." More laughter followed, most of it cruel. The questions and comments came so thick and fast that he had not been able to answer or reply. The young rider whom they called Lord Mattian was dismounting. "Don't be asses. Come on, give me a hand." He threw his reins to a girl next to him. She leant across, grabbing them easily. The boy saw a flash of bright, laughing eyes filled with excitement. She looked about 13 and rode a sleek, thoroughbred horse. The horse was the colour of young chestnuts. Lord Mattian jumped down from his own steed and stepped carefully through the bushes towards him. "So, my friend, where are you from, eh?" he asked. "The villages? Tenementera side of the city?" At last the boy found his voice. "Yes, sir, on the Tenementera, by the eastern side, sir." "Jolly good. Fruit picking for dinner?" "Hunting, sir." There was another loud guffaw at this from a couple of the older riders. "Ha ha ha! Hunting, he says. Hunting, is it? Then where's his bally horse, eh? Ha ha ha! Run off! Back to the slum stables, no doubt." "Well, it's got to be the slums, hasn't it? You only have to look at his jacket." "Yes, you won't get a proper hunting horse in the Tenementera." "Well, not unless it's roasting on the spits." "Ha ha ha ha! Tenementera delicacy, horse flesh, delicious. Ha ha ha!" "Quiet," said Lord Mattian. He crouched down at the side of the bush, looking at the problem the boy was in. He turned back towards his companions. "Stop messing around and don't be rude. Just hurry up and help me, will you?" The others looked around, embarrassed. "Right-o, my lord. Hold hard there. Give us a chance." The older men hurried to get their feet from out of their stirrups. They swung their legs over the saddles and dropped to the ground. The boy could see that they were much less important than Mattian. The young lord turned back to him and spoke again. "What were you hunting for, my friend, eh? And where is your weapon?" "Oh, I don't have a weapon, sir. Essence hunting is what I meant, and I was just out—" "Essence hunting?" Mattian was obviously impressed at this. "As a hobby? Or are you a student?" The boy grinned, in spite of his embarrassment. It was a compliment that this young lord thought that he might be wealthy enough to go out essence hunting just as a hobby to pass the time. No, sir, not a hobby, sir. I'm a student. Well, more like an apprentice, sir. I hope to work with the mages one day." That sounded much more impressive, but even as he said this, he cursed himself for trying to show off. "Good show, an essence student," said Mattian. "Always been interested in those ideas myself." Lord Mattian was already cutting away through the thickest of the brambles. He winced himself a couple of times as the thorns stuck into his fingers. The two older men, who the boy now guessed were probably Mattian's servants, were also hacking at the surrounding shrubs to get closer to him. "By the way, I'm Mattian, Lord Mattian from the Variegat." The boy felt suddenly embarrassed again. The Variegat was the most expensive part of the city Gari, the most expensive part of Beltheron city. If this young lord lived there, then he must be even more wealthy and powerful than he had first imagined. "And you are?" The boy's head was still spinning, so he didn't reply at first. "You are?" Mattian repeated. "Stuck crown top over backside, that's what he is," joked another rider who had just arrived in the group. He was closer to Mattian's age than the other men. He reined in his steed and looked down with amusement. "Jorian, be quiet. I have to put up with enough nonsense from Bargoth and Dross here. Get yourself down and be useful for a change." The newcomer just grinned again. It was clear that he was not a servant, but obviously from the Variegat too. The cruel sneer on his face made it obvious that he had no intention of getting down to help. "Why are you wasting your time, Matty? The lad'll get himself out soon enough." He pointed impatiently back down the forest path. "We don't want to lose the trail. We'll never catch that beast if you don't hurry up." Mattian looked troubled for a moment. The boy thought that he was going to change his mind, not help him after all. But then the young lord came to a decision. It's probably too late to worry about catching the Peggiar now anyway. It will probably be still around tomorrow. I've never seen one hanging around so much. We can always come out again in the morning." Jorian still hesitated. His horse snickered and stamped its foot, as eager as her master to be back on the chase. "Well, leave or stay, Jorian," said Mattian. "Either way, I'm helping him." "No need to," said Jorian. "He's a Tenementera urchin. They're good at helping themselves. Scavengers and thieves, the lot of them." The boy felt his head grow hot with anger. "Sir, I'm not a thief." "Hush, hush, there's no need. Quiet, Jorian. And don't talk about him like that. It's ill-mannered and it does you no credit." Jorian sighed and turned towards the girl on the chestnut horse. "Come on, Aliana, let's leave him to his new friend." He leant in close to speak to her more quietly. As he did, he raised his hand to brush some pale hair from her cheek. She seemed undecided whether to follow or not. "Oh, go if you must," Mattian said. "We'll have him free in a moment anyway." The two men called Bargoth and Dross were pulling at the last of the creepers wrapped around the boy's feet. He noticed that they still had wide grins on their faces. They'd carried on chopping away at the branches all the time they were speaking. Now most of the toughest branches had gone from the boy's legs and around his shoulders. He realised with relief that he could move more freely, without the stabbing spikes cutting into him any more. "Good show, and nearly there," Mattian said. "By the way, you still didn't tell me your name." It's Darian, sir. Darian Melgades." "And how long have you been in here, Darian?" "A few minutes before you arrived, sir, that's all. I'm very grateful." "Oh, there's no need, no need. There, now we have you." Mattian helped him get to his feet. "Come on now, my friend, show willing." Darian stood up. He winced with pain as the deepest cuts complained at the sudden movement. He staggered slightly, still feeling off balance. The muscles of his left leg had taken most of the weight while he was stuck, and now he could feel them starting to cramp up. "Is he all right?" Aliana asked. She had made no move to follow the young man called Jorian, and he was now more impatient to get going than ever. "Well, of course he's all right," Jorian replied. "Those beggars are like cats, always land on their feet." He turned to the girl once more. "Come on, Ali, I'm not waiting any longer." He turned his horse with a hard, jagged pull on the left rein and kicked its sides heavily to get it to trot. The horse gave a short whinny of pain. "If you're not coming too, I'll see you at your parents' dinner this evening, Ali," he shouted over his shoulder as he sped away, still kicking at his horse. Darian saw Aliana drop her head to one side. There was a smile around the corners of her mouth. She caught his eye, and he looked away quickly. Mattian swept back up into the saddle in one easy movement. He looked down at the boy, noticing his thin arms and legs. His tunic was badly torn and of poor quality. Apart from a leather pouch hanging from his belt, the boy carried no possessions with him. Mattian saw how he limped when he tried to stand, and noticed the loose leather flapping from one of his shoes. Aliana leant towards Mattian. "We can't leave the lad like this," she whispered. "He's hurt. Look at the way he's limping. It will take him an hour or more to reach the city walls in that state. The sun will be going down by then. He might miss the curfew. Mattian hesitated. It would be awkward to take the boy with them. Even so, Aliana was right. It would be bad form to risk letting the boy be left outside the city gates. He couldn't be seen to do that, especially at the moment, with the rumours of roving animals so near to the city. At night time, the creatures seemed to grow in confidence. Silk foxes, Peggiar, even Hur lions were now a regular threat. The curfew had been put in place a couple of months before to make sure the people of Beltheron were safely inside before dark. But even so, several young people, their age and even younger, had gone missing in recent weeks. Aliana spoke again. "We can't leave him out here. You have a duty to help, Mattian." He looked at Aliana and his voice softened. He turned back to the boy. "You'll need a ride back, I suppose." Darien began to stammer a reply. "Oh, I'll be fine, sir. I just need to—" "Ow!" He winced again as the cramping pain in his leg got worse. Was it cramp? Or had he sprained or even broken his ankle? "Nonsense, you're exhausted, and a couple of those scratches look really nasty. I couldn't dream of leaving you here to walk back. Besides, Aliana's right. It'll be dark before you can make it on foot." Mattian smiled widely at him. He leant down and dropped his arm towards Darien. He held his hand open to pull him up. "Come on, jump up. Old Zarak here can take two of us, can't you, boy?" It seemed that Zarak, his horse, understood him, for it whinnied enthusiastically. It shook its head up and down, rattling the golden chains of its bridle. Darien had never seen such a beautiful creature. Obviously a thoroughbred from the finest stables, its coat gleamed and shone in the early evening light like polished bronze. "Well, if you don't mind, sir." "Nothing to mind about. Think no more of it. A gentleman has to help out a fellow." Darien managed to hide a grin at the pompous way that Mattian spoke. He stepped forwards and was about to let himself be pulled up behind Mattian when he suddenly remembered. "Oh, excuse me a moment. I've forgotten something." He turned back to the thicket of thorny bushes. They'd now been thoroughly hacked to pieces by the swords of the young lord and his friends. "What's he up to?" said Bargoth. "He'll get himself stuck again, he will," Dross replied. "Brains are not uppermost in the slums of the Tenementera. Know what I mean, Dross?" "Quiet," said Mattian. The grins dropped away from their faces. Then, more quietly, he added, "Don't tease the fellow." But Darien didn't hear any of this. He was too busy looking for the broken pieces of his essence jar. Thankfully, it was easy to reach them this time, with most of the vines and thorns around them now bent or broken by the sword blows. He reached down and wrapped the three largest pieces of glass in a long cloth bag from his belt. There were a couple of smaller shards and the heavier base, unbroken in one large piece, still to gather up. He was just reaching for these when he felt someone else beside him. "Can I help?" It was the girl, Aliana. She had dismounted and was leaning into the thicket just by his shoulder. He felt clumsy all of a sudden and nearly dropped the bag. "May I?" She held out her hand to take it. "You'll need both hands to reach those." He caught a waft of perfume as she moved. It smelled of honeysuckle and spices. Thank you." He blushed as he handed her the bag. "Watch your fingers. Those pieces are sharp. What was it? Your flask?" "Essence jar." "Oh, I've heard of those, but I've never seen one. May I look?" She began to open the top of the bag. "Well, I suppose, yes." "Oh, what beautiful colours!" He turned away from her as she looked at the broken glass. He felt his face burning. The thought of making such a fine young lady get down from her horse to scrabble in the dust was shameful. What would his mother say if she found out that he'd been so rude? In another moment, he had the final pieces carefully cupped in his hands. He turned back to her. "I'd better put these in." She held the neck of the bag open for him as he placed the precious fragments inside. "This glass, is it valuable?" He nodded. "Very. I suppose I'll have to try to fix it. I can't afford to buy another." He blushed deeply again at this sudden confession of just how poor he was. He looked down and saw the state of his muddy boots. The leather of one of the toes was curling up at the side. The stitching had come undone weeks ago. He'd meant to fix it, but he'd always put it off. Now, it was too late. It's all right. Aliana held the bag to him. She smiled. Come on. He couldn't bring himself to look at her face, but he mumbled a quiet, Thank you, m'lady. M'lady? She pulled her face. Oh, none of that nonsense. Call me Aliana. Ali, if you like. She stood and turned away from him. He got another glimpse of her smile as she swung herself back up onto her horse. Ready? Asked Mattian. Darien limped towards him and felt himself being pulled up onto the back of the saddle. Hold tight! Mattian clicked his tongue at his horse and it leapt forwards. The others followed close behind. He heard a whinny at his ear. He turned and saw a sea of bright golden hair curling in the wind as Aliana caught up with them. Along with the musty scent of the horses, he caught another breath of honeysuckle and spice. Her chestnut mare galloped up neck to neck with Zarak. Together they spurred their horses on towards the city. He felt the throbbing of their hooves pounding deeply through his chest like his own heartbeat. After a few seconds, Darien heard the strident blast of the hunting horn again. It cut through the noise of the galloping hooves and hung in the early evening air like a warning of fire or the threat of attack. Mattian reined in Zarak to a halt. Darien had to grip more tightly with his legs to keep his balance. It sent another jolt of pain through his ankle. Aliana, Bargoth and Dross slowed down more gently up ahead. They pulled on the reins and circled their horses back towards them. Mattian looked back towards the line of trees they had just left. Darien followed his gaze, shielding his eyes against the low sun in the western sky. That's Jorian's horn, said Bargoth. Mattian nodded. Do you think he's found it? Must have. He wouldn't call us back for anything less. Mattian hesitated for a moment. Dross had also ridden up alongside. Should we go, sir? We ought to, said Mattian, but he still waited, gazing towards the woods. Then he glanced up at the sun low in the sky. We probably still have time before the curfew. Yeah, and what about... Bargoth jerked his head in Darien's direction. Mattian nodded briefly and made his decision. Can't be helped, he replied. You're up to it, Darien, aren't you, eh? Can cope with a bit of a gallop, surely. Want to join the hunt? Well, I suppose I think... But... Bargoth seemed doubtful. He can ride with me, said Aliana. Your Zarak is swifter, Mattian, but my Hensa here is stronger. She'll take us both. Won't you, girl? Hensa, Aliana's chestnut horse, whickered and nodded her head up and down, excited by the thought of a race. Mattian's horse, Zarak, snorted, as if to say, Think you're faster than me? You're on. The horn blew again. Lord, we're going anyway, with or without you, Dross said. Lord Mattian gave another quick nod. Right, off you go. We'll follow. Darien didn't have a chance to say whether he wanted to go with them or not. With an uncomfortable mixture of shoving, lifting and twisting, he found himself moved from behind Mattian and over onto the back of Aliana's saddle. Bargoth and Dross were already racing away towards the trees. The hooves of their huge horses raised a cloud of dust, thickly filling the air behind them. Now Darien heard another wail of the horn. Aliana clicked her tongue, and Hensa leapt forwards. Darien's heart jumped in his chest once more as they sped after the other riders.